Something very subtle is happening inside grocery stores right now, and most people have no idea it's even happening. There are no empty shelves, no panic buying, no obvious shortages, but if you pay attention, you start to notice something strange. Certain everyday foods are not being restocked the way they used to be, not officially removed, not discontinued, just quietly reduced over time, fewer options, fewer restocks, and less consistency on the shelf. And here's the part that makes this even more interesting. A specific group of people notice this before anyone else. Preppers. People who prepare for supply disruptions long before they become visible are quietly buying up certain grocery items faster than normal, not because of panic, but because of patterns they recognize. And once you see what they're buying, you start to understand why store shelves are slowly changing in ways most shoppers never notice. Today, we're breaking down 9 foods quietly disappearing from store shelves and why preppers are acting early. Let's start with one of the most basic foods in the world. Number 9. Rice. Rice is one of those foods people assume will always be available, cheap, simple, and found everywhere. But global rice supply is becoming less stable than most people realize. Weather disruptions in major producing regions, export restrictions, and rising transportation costs are all creating pressure behind the scenes. Retailers don't usually announce anything, they just adjust quietly. That means fewer bulk bags on shelves, less variety in package sizes, and slower restocking cycles in some stores. At first, shoppers don't notice anything unusual, but over time, the changes become more visible. Your usual brand might disappear for a few weeks, or the larger bag sizes suddenly become harder to find. Preppers pay attention to exactly this kind of shift, because rice is one of the first foods people stock up on when uncertainty rises. And when bulk buying behavior increases across many regions, retail systems adjust long before shelves look empty, which leads to the next item, a food that seems simple, but is quietly changing in the background. Number 8. Pasta. Pasta looks like one of the most stable foods in the grocery store, but its stability depends entirely on wheat supply and energy costs, and both have become increasingly unpredictable in recent years. Instead of removing products, manufacturers usually simplify production first. That means fewer specialty shapes, fewer seasonal or limited versions, and fewer alternative brands on the shelf. To most shoppers, the aisle still looks full, but the variety slowly shrinks without anyone really noticing. Preppers often buy pasta in bulk because it stores easily, lasts long, and can be used in many different meals. So even small changes in availability get noticed early in that group. And once demand patterns shift slightly upward, retailers quietly streamline inventory to reduce complexity, which creates a slow but steady reduction in variety. And that brings us to something even more sensitive, a kitchen essential that most people don't think twice about. Number 7. Cooking oil. Cooking oil is one of the most essential items in any kitchen. But it depends on crops like soybeans, sunflowers, and palm oil, all of which are highly sensitive to weather conditions, global demand, and export policies. When supply tightens, stores rarely remove oil completely. Instead, they reduce variety, fewer brands, fewer bottle sizes, and fewer promotions or discounts. At first glance, everything looks normal, but over time, shoppers notice their preferred brand becomes harder to find. Preppers often stock cooking oil early because it is used in almost every type of cooking, and once buying patterns begin to shift even slightly, retailers adjust distribution quietly to balance supply, which leads to subtle but long-term changes in what stays consistently available. Number 6. Sugar. Sugar looks like one of the most stable items in any grocery store. Always available, always cheap, always predictable. But behind the scenes, the supply chain is more fragile than it appears. Sugar production depends heavily on agricultural output, refining capacity, and global logistics. Even small disruptions can ripple through the system quickly. Instead of empty shelves, what usually happens first is subtle. Package sizes start to shrink, bulk options become less common, and discount promotions appear less frequently than before. At first, it feels like nothing has changed. But over time, shoppers notice they are paying slightly more for slightly less. Preppers track sugar closely because it plays a major role in long-term storage and food preservation. So even small shifts in pricing or availability are noticed early. And when buying patterns begin to shift upward, retailers quietly adjust supply distribution to avoid sudden gaps in stock, which leads to shelves that still look normal, but behave differently behind the scenes. And now we move into something even more essential, a food category that feels basic, but is becoming harder to stabilize over time. Number 5. Flour. Flour is one of the most fundamental pantry ingredients in the world. Bread, baking, cooking, everything depends on it, but flour is only as stable as its wheat supply chain. And that supply chain is becoming increasingly unpredictable due to climate changes and export restrictions in key producing regions. When pressure builds, manufacturers don't usually remove flour from shelves. They simplify inventory instead. That means fewer specialty flours, fewer organic or niche variations, and more focus on high-volume standard products. To most shoppers, the aisle still looks normal, but variety slowly disappears in the background. Preppers often store flour in large quantities because it is versatile and long-lasting when stored correctly. So even small changes in availability are noticed early, and once demand increases even slightly, restocking becomes less consistent across different regions, which creates small gaps that most shoppers assume are temporary, but often signal longer-term adjustments. And now we move into something that feels harmless, but has already shown early signs of instability. Number 4. Peanut butter. Peanut butter is one of the most common household staples, affordable, calorie-dense, and long-lasting. But peanut production is highly sensitive to weather conditions and agricultural stress, and processing costs have increased steadily in recent years. Instead of removing products entirely, manufacturers adjust quietly. That means fewer large jars on shelves, fewer specialty or organic versions, and occasional inconsistencies in restocking cycles. At first, nothing looks alarming. The shelf still exists. The product is still there. But availability becomes less predictable over time. Preppers often include peanut butter in storage plans because it is one of the most efficient long-term calorie sources available. So even small changes in supply behavior are quickly amplified in buying patterns. And when that happens, retailers respond by adjusting inventory flow quietly rather than making public announcements. Which leads us into the final section, where the most noticeable shifts begin to appear in everyday grocery behavior. Number 3. Canned meat. Canned meat has always been considered a reliable long-term food option. It stores well, it lasts for years, and it's widely used in emergency preparation. But behind the scenes, this category is under more pressure than most people realize. Meat prices have increased globally. Packaging costs continue to rise, and energy costs for processing facilities remain unstable. Instead of removing canned meat from shelves, manufacturers reduce variety. That means fewer brands available, fewer flavor options, and fewer promotional discounts in stores. At first, the shelf still looks normal, but over time, shoppers begin noticing their usual brand is missing more often. Preppers pay close attention to this category because it is one of the core survival foods in long-term storage planning. So even small changes in availability are quickly amplified within that group, and once demand patterns shift upward, retailers quietly adjust inventory systems to match new buying behavior, which leads to subtle but consistent reduction in variety over time. Now we move into something most people don't think of as sensitive at all, but global supply tells a different story. Number 2. Instant coffee. Instant coffee seems simple and stable. Always on the shelf, always available. But coffee supply chains are extremely sensitive to weather patterns, crop yields, and global demand fluctuations. When supply tightens, retailers don't remove coffee completely. Instead, they prioritize high-demand products and reduce slower-moving variations. That means fewer bulk sizes, fewer budget-friendly options, and fewer consistent promotions. Preppers often store coffee because it is a high-value comfort item during uncertain times. And when buying behavior increases slightly, availability begins to shift quietly across different stores, not dramatically, but enough that shoppers start noticing inconsistencies in what used to feel predictable. Which brings us to the final item, the most essential and most overlooked food on this entire list. Number 1, salt. Salt may be the most basic item in any kitchen, but it is also one of the most important survival essentials in the world. While salt itself is abundant, retail availability is still influenced by packaging, transportation, and industrial demand. Retailers rarely reduce salt completely. Instead, they simplify options: fewer specialty salts, fewer large bulk containers, and fewer promotional variations. Preppers always prioritize salt in long-term storage because it is essential for food preservation. So, even small shifts in demand patterns can lead to noticeable changes in stocking behavior over time. And that reveals the real pattern behind this entire list. It's not sudden disappearance. It's quiet adjustment, less variety, less consistency, and slower replenishment cycles that most shoppers never notice until it's too late. The key takeaway isn't panic buying, it's awareness, because the people who notice these changes early are always the ones who prepare first. What's happening in grocery stores right now isn't obvious. You won't see headlines about it, and you won't see empty shelves tomorrow morning, but over time, the changes add up. A few missing options here, a smaller package there, a brand that quietly disappears, and most people only notice when it's already happened. That's why awareness matters. Not fear, not panic. Just understanding what's changing before it becomes obvious to everyone else. Now we want to hear from you. Have you noticed any of these foods becoming harder to find in your local store? Let us know in the comments.